have this large Facebook group that is for coffee drinkers, and they don't even talk about sugar. But some of them take there's two Olympians in that. It's like, it takes like 2-3 months. It's almost like a methamphetamine, like a speed withdrawal. You ever heard this term, anhedonia? So anhedonia is, the inability to feel joy, right? And so people are just really blue and depressed because they beat the crap out of their dopamine and their endorphins, and they're just, they can't get it back. It takes 2-3 longer, sometimes months, to come back, but then they do recover, right? It's the same as speed.
Welcome to the 1000 Days Sober podcast. My name is Davy. I am not an alcoholic. I refuse to be anonymous. I am someone who lives a self-led life, alcohol-free as fuck, and I spend every waking moment of that life helping other people do the same, like right now, brothers and sisters. I know you've been used to our daily podcast, so this was one where we're going to go a little bit longer than 15 minutes. So get your jasmine pearl tea in, lock yourself in, because this episode is not just a conversation, it's a wake-up call. I am joined today by Mike Collins, aka the Sugar-Free Man. He is a pioneer in the sugar addiction recovery space and the founder of sugaraddiction.com and quitsugarsummit.com. That's where you'll be able to find him. With over 4 decades of recovery under his belt and a mission that's helped hundreds of thousands kick the sugar habit, Mike's work cuts through the noise. No nonsense. Together today, we dive deep into why sugar might be the most overlooked drug on the planet, a neurotoxic substance we feed our kids without a second thought. We explore why sugar becomes the first relapse for so many people who choose to become alcohol-free as fuck, how caffeine, flour, and emotional triggers keep the habit alive, and why our culture gaslights the fuck out of us if we try to quit with calls of fanatic. From childhood conditioning to adult codependency, we unravel the emotional and societal layers that make sugar so addictive and so accepted. So, if you have ever struggled with food cravings, found yourself in a nightly war with a tub of ice cream, or wondered whether your treat might actually be a trap, this conversation will hit home. And the reason I asked Mike to come on the show right now is I recently took the sovereign vow to never eat sugar again in my life. And I made it not from parts, I made it from self-energy, just like I did with alcohol, just like I did with cigarettes, just like I did with gambling, just like I did with pornography. And I am telling you, I am smashing it. I never think about it. I never crave about it. I never want to, even when I smell it, I don't care anymore. It's just not something that my body wants. And you one day will be like me if that's what you want. And someone like Mike Collins will help you get there. So without further ado, I will shut the hell up and leave you in the capable hands of the sugar-free man, the legendary Mike Collins. Hey, Michael, good to see you.
I was waiting on the one you sent and the other invite. So
my apologies.
No worries. No worries.
So how's the sugar-free man today?
The sugar-free man's doing well, thanks. I moved. I just got my sign kind of back up a little bit, but I'm just moving along. Things are moving along.
I like it. We've already done an intro, Mike, so everybody tuning in has already heard a little bit about you. Oh, you've disappeared. Where are you gone? Oh, you're back. You're back. Yeah, we've done a little intro so people know about you. So we'll just dive into it.
Okay.
Why do you think sugar becomes the next trap after people quit drinking alcohol? What's going on there, Mike?
Yeah, that's we can attack this in 2 ways. All right. So first of all, they're not going to sugar; they're going back to sugar. They're truly returning to their first drug addiction, right? And so I will start from the beginning because I think it'll make more sense for folks, and I think they'll relate. So, when we're younger, we don't realize, likely in the womb, but probably by 3 or 4. We're ingesting so much sugar for the size of our bodies And, anybody from the emotional eating world will get this completely. But whatever worries, fears, anxieties, your parents were probably complicit in it. And they would, give you a cookie and send you to the TV. And what came of it is this deep limbic understanding, feeling, subconscious knowing that you get this big blast of dopamine. And it's disproportionate for a human of that size in general. But definitely, you don't realize that it makes you feel just a little bit better, takes the edge off. And this, it's a very common construct in the world of alcohol and drugs that if you started using alcohol and drugs at 14 or 15, you stopped growing emotionally. You were not solving life's problems. You were numbing them at 4 o'clock the next day, and you just keep repeating this cycle and you never get anything forward. Well, extrapolate that backwards to 4 or 5, and you're talking about a situation where unconsciously most of the world is having a difficult, like they're not consciously realized. The craving manifests itself as a sweet taste on the tongue, right? It manifests from, this is the thing I study the most because we don't have yet the brain science to explain it completely, but it will take a deep limbic desire, feeling, need for a dopamine hit. When I say dopamine, I mean dopamine, serotonin, norepinephrine, GABA, oxytocin, adrenal glands, endorphins, cannabinoid receptors, endocannabinoid receptors. I mean, it'll take that need and convert it to the frontal cortex to a thought, a feeling, a desire of a craving for a sweet. Whatever your vice or poison is, it's, going out in a snowstorm for ice cream or, whatever it is, whatever you have trained yourself that you like, quote unquote, you like that crunchy, you like that smooth, you like that sweet, whatever it is. And everybody's is varied, just like everybody's, taste in alcohol. So then fast forward, we run into beer, pot, whatever, 14, 15 years old. And if, we have difficulty in our childhood, rough times, chaos, addiction, whatever, abuse, God forbid, what happens is then we move on to the nicotine and the alcohol and the drugs. But then beyond that, when we stop, what happens is it almost like a Suboxone method, and this is in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous twice, and it's all over the back of all recovery rooms. We go back to sugar to continue to self-soothe this emotional need, right? And so it's that process that no one really kind of puts two and two together. They don't look at sugar as an emotional salve, as an emotional management system that we have outsourced our management system, our emotional managing, to this substance because it's so freely available. Like anybody can have the stuff, right? Anybody can, 99 out of 100 parents are not going to be upset with you if you give a candy to a baby. Most of them, 90% will thank you. But it's that, you can't get in trouble for that. It's not illegal. It's almost any child can get it without having any money, really. And so it's a culture that's developed, and now very, very, very clear. It's very clear scientifically. I've interviewed for over 400 of the world's leading experts on sugar and addiction and whatever. And the science is the brain science. This is a neurotoxin. A couple of them are getting real forceful on social media. Sugar shrinks the brain. We have the studies, right? It's related to Alzheimer's, calling Alzheimer's diabetes 3. Something is going on in the brain with this drug, right? And if people don't unconsciously break the habit, uncouple the unconscious use, or I wrote a thing the other day. It almost went a little viral. It's like toxic calories, the the long-awaited funeral for empty calories, because we've been think of like sugar as empty calories. It reminds me of George Carlin's skit about between baseball and football. It's like, oh, no harm, no foul. We can just have it, and it's just empty, and it's a little bit of a treat. But in reality, especially in the last 3 years with metabolic psychiatry ascending, it really has become this a deep understanding that when we ingest sugar, whether we know it or not consciously, we are ingesting a substance that soothes us just a little bit. And the problem is when we get to be adults, and way before we get to be adults, but as adults, the only reason we're ingesting sugar at any habit level, I'm talking about almost very little to high, is that we are, when we ingest it, we are soothing an emotional want or need, right? Unconsciously. We don't know we're doing it because it doesn't manifest like that traditional, I need a beer on Friday afternoon because it's been a rough week. Nah, it doesn't come up like that. It comes up like, oh, wouldn't a nice piece of chocolate be good, or whatever, whatever the feeling that you get. So, that's the whole arc of how we got here and why it is so insidious in society, because first of all, the science wasn't as clear as it has been. The brain science part. We all know about the freaking body for 100 years, diabetes, weight gain, fatty liver, blah, blah, blah. Well, in the last 3 to 5 years, even 2 years, this ascension of the understanding of what sugar is, the neurotoxin sugar is doing to the brain is ascended. And there's lots of studies and lots coming out every day.
When you said about the emotional, the soothing aspect of it, when I was a kid, my family rarely drank coffee. Back then, before Starbucks, you drank coffee out of a jar and it was granular, and your mum would have one a day or something, but kids weren't allowed it because it would keep you up at night or whatever. So we drank tea. Later, after I stopped drinking alcohol and Starbucks comes up and I start working in coffee shops, I started to develop this kind of like penchant for lattes. And recently I had a Lingo, like a blood sugar device on my arm for a couple of weeks.
Oh yeah.
And I realized that when I drank my latte, my blood sugar went all over the place and I started to feel like shit. But then I was like, well, what is this? Like, is it the coffee? Like, what's going on? And it was I'm just trying to be not a vegan, but trying to avoid dairy because dairy's inflammatory for me. So I was having oat milk lattes. And of course, when I went into the store and asked them about the oat milk, it was full of sugar. And I couldn't, for the life of me, figure out why it was so difficult for me to stop drinking coffee, because I didn't really like the taste of it. I didn't like the way it made me feel, but I kept going back to it. And now you're talking, I think it's the calm. It felt like a treat. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I have a great story about this. So this is in our program, we encourage people to stop caffeine as well. And it's really what's called a wired together, fired together phenomena. Tea, chocolate, coffee are always traditionally used with sugar, right? And so about 7 years ago, I was working with an Olympic athlete. She actually won a bronze medal in the Olympics in swimming. And by this time, she's a mom, she's a chiropractor, but she wanted to quit the sugar. She wasn't overweight, wasn't a weight thing, but it was making her groggy and whatever. And her kids were starting to really abuse sugar. And she had it around and whatever. So I did our regular 90-day engagement where I coached her and whatever, and she just couldn't quit. I mean, she could not quit sugar. She was still drinking black coffee. And so we kind of dug into it and we tried to figure it all out. And I honestly, I coached her for another 2 months for free because selfishly, I wanted a testimonial from an Olympian, right? And so come to find out, the coaches were giving her coffee at 10 years of age for performance in the pool. Okay. And her brain had wired these things together. So when she drank that black coffee, it kept the cravings for sugar alive the whole time we were working together, and we were not able to. We got rid of the coffee, and the sugar went right behind it. And it was hard because she had a deep coffee habit. It was the same, similar, but I think sometimes coffee. I have this large Facebook group that is for coffee drinkers, and they don't even talk about sugar. But some of them take there's two Olympians in that. It's like, it takes like 2-3 months. It's almost like a methamphetamine, like a speed withdrawal. You ever heard this term anhedonia? So anhedonia is, yeah, the inability to feel joy, right? And so people are just really blue and depressed because they beat the crap out of their dopamine and their endorphins, and they can't get it back. It takes 2-3 longer, sometimes months, to come back, but then they do recover, right? It's the same as speed. And that's not everyone. A lot of people can just get out of it, in 10 days. But yeah, caffeine plays a role in this for sure. And so, I don't want people to think I'm like crazily fanatic, but this is 57,000 detoxes and thousands of one-on-one clients with myself and the coaches. We see it over and over again. It's at this juncture, really, it's just pattern recognition. There is a spectrum, sure. Everybody's not going to have the same type of withdrawals, but for the most part, it's pretty standard within a 5 or 7 day window of, where you're going to be during the process.
It's interesting then that you said, I don't want to be seen as a fanatic.
Yeah.
It reminded me of my dad. He's a smoker, and I was having a conversation with him saying how much I love him even more as he's getting older. I want him to live longer, and I'm not asking you to give up smoking, Dad, but I just want to let you know how it impacts my life. Blah blah blah. Anyway, my dad's view is pretty much like, what do you want me to do, Lee? Like, do you literally want me to stop doing everything that is good in the world? And I think this is the problem.
Yeah.
As someone who's stopped watching pornography, doesn't eat sugar, doesn't drink alcohol, doesn't smoke cigarettes, all these things that somebody would say are things that are really good for us. I look at them like, I'm glad that I don't have them in my life because I feel free.
Right.
Like there's something there, Mike, right?
Oh, look, I mean, I call it an evolutionary wrong turn. Okay. And it started in Great Britain, when they would go to the west of Africa and they would load up the slaves. They would go to the Caribbean and the United States, and then the ships that came back would be loaded with rum and tea and coffee and sugar, mostly sugar, and it went in Great Britain, which on the money, you think El Chapo or the cartels, the Sinaloa cartel, made a lot of money. In comparison, in that era of 50 or 100 years, Great Britain made so much money that it was able to take over the world because, and the proof is there. Like if you look at the history lessons, and I love the history lesson. I always say you can't figure out how we get out of this problem until we figure out how we got in it. And so it went from near zero or, real low amounts. It was like a real treat once or 3 times a year. You would get sugar, kids would get sugar, people would get sugar. And it wasn't as prevalent in tea and coffee, to like where it's close to where it is now over the last couple hundred years, where it's, 150 pounds a year kind of thing. And that ascension is, it's the answer to why this is a problem. Culturally, no one alive understands or remembers. And when you look at the literature in Great Britain, where there's people that spanned 40 or 50 years as, say, a doctor or physician or whatever, they really rail against caffeine and sugar in their writings of, it's turning society into whatever. I mean, they have a lot of negative things to say about it because they were able to watch when they were children, not having much, to when they were older, 50, 60, 70-year-old practicing physicians. They were able to see the progression in society in both in the folks' health and their attitudes and, their weight and everything. So it's just now it's so ingrained that all that's been forgotten. Like, it's all forgotten. No one knows that this is happening to these quote unquote, like you said, like fanatical, like these now legal drugs, these now legal treats. And, you mention it being a treat, and this is a misnomer now. Like, scientifically, it's a misnomer. Like, your father saying it belies someone who grew up in the era where they would advertise cigarettes on television. And it's like, no one really thought it was that bad. But then all the science came along and bingo, here we go,
It still blows my mind when I talk to, I'm 50. So when I talk to 60, 70-year-olds, and they smoke 20 to 40 cigarettes a day, and they talk to me that they've developed a cough or the chest is hurting, and they have no idea. Like, I keep going to the doctors and they don't know what's wrong with me. That is how steeped it is in their mind that what they're doing is normal. You know what I mean? So to me, sugar is one of the most insidious, because it like I look at what's been going on in the last 20 years, and cigarettes is now being maligned, and youngsters now are more likely to vape. That's a problem in itself, but fewer and fewer of them are going to smoke. I see some point when alcohol will get to that. I don't think we're there yet, but I think alcohol will get to that level at some point in the next.
Little bits of that coming,
next 100 years. But sugar, holy shit, man! It's like everybody just thinks it's brilliant, and it just has so many. Like, you were talking about the tea. As a youngster growing up in the north of England, looking at my dad and wanting to be a man, one of the rituals obviously is going to the pub with him or him allowing you to drink alcohol. But one ritual that people don't talk a lot about is handling hot liquid for the first time. So what I mean by that is the trust that you get off your parents for being able to either make or hold a cup of tea. And as a child, what are you going to do with that cup of tea? You're going to put at least 2 or 3 sugars in it. And your mum and your dad is not going to say anything because they have sugar in it as well. So from like the age of like 8, 9, there's a status thing as well embedded in your mind. Like, so it's no wonder you have an emotional attachment to it, not just a neurological and a biological one, right?
Oh, that's about, I'm stealing that. That is so true. I mean, it's so true, and probably more true in Great Britain than it is here, because, they don't give children the hot liquids. So that the analogy or the description of the trust you're getting for, being included in this family, this daily ritual or whatever, that's amazing. And I was just thinking, I never thought of this before, but, when something's hot like that, I'm sure it expands blood vessels and makes the delivery of the caffeine and the sugar quicker. You know what I mean?
There's another aspect to it as I'm thinking about it. Obviously, because it can't be so hot as a kid, you have to put more milk in. And of course, the milk we were drinking back then is full of sugar. Like my dad, actually, when he developed diabetes, it blew his mind that he had to stop drinking milk. He would have cartons of milk by the side of his bed, and he'd be drinking it, and he couldn't figure it all out. Absolutely crazy. What made you question your role with sugar? Because I imagine at some point you ate it and then you didn't. Like, what happened?
Well, it was right after I got sober. Basically, I read a book called Sugar Blues, and Sugar Blues was written by a guy named William Duffy. Duffy eventually, he was at a party one time, and a voice from behind him said he was putting 2 lumps of sugar in his coffee, and voice says, I wouldn't have that in my house, let alone my body. And he sure as hell knew the voice because it was Gloria Swanson, the famous movie star. And so he, turns around, eventually marries the Gloria Swanson, and she was a well-known health nut back then. And so they publicized that book in the late 60s and early 70s, I think is when they really were after it. And they were on television shows, and you can still find an old television show when they're talking about it on YouTube. But yeah, I mean, so I read that book, and caffeine more, but sugar and caffeine, like I would drink 16 ounce Mountain Dews, 6 or 8 of them a day. Okay. They used to call me the Mountain Dew man. At the time, before energy drinks, it was the highest caffeinated beverage on the market, and it's full sugar, right? And so it was just like anybody that has an all-day coffee or tea habit, right? And it just started anxiety and all this, and it was acting honestly like the drugs and alcohol. So I just, I try. And I would suggest this if anybody doesn't join a group or a program or, whatever, get some help, is that if you're going to stop this whole process, quit caffeine first, because your Suboxone for that exercise, 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, whatever it takes, is the sugar. Okay to have the sugar, just don't have the caffeine. That means no chocolate because it has caffeine in it. Then use the sugar, get off the sugar and use flour. Okay. You can use pasta and bread and whatever, but don't use sugar. And then the next step would be getting off the flour, because that'll help, your health and it'll help your addiction and get you free. But that step down, I think, is in order of the difficulty of quitting these things. Now, we always rip the Band-Aid off and do all three at the same time. But, if you're listening to this and you want to just, do it yourself, caffeine first, sugar second, flour third.
Really interesting that you said that, because what you're doing is you're saying to the listeners, you get it's almost like you remove something from your life. You've got this gaping hole, and you need to fill it with something. And what you're doing is saying to them, this is the way to fill it until you gradually get to a place where you're strong enough of mind, spirit, or whatever to actually replace it with something healthy, I guess.
I call it healing. That's exactly what I call it. You do heal up. Even if, one of the things that's we've doubled back on or changed a little bit is counting days in this process is not futile, but like in our alcohol recovery, like I can tell you to the day, almost to the hour when I quit alcohol or drugs, my last time using alcohol or drugs. But I could never tell you what exact day I stopped using sugar, flour, caffeine, because it was so fluid in there. As relapse is part of the process. You're in a society you're going to be the odd person out. Unless you are in a community, people aren't going to understand. And as a matter of fact, they're probably going to fight against you. You quit drinking, quit smoking, you quit using sugar. They start to question your sanity. They're like, come on, you've lost 40 pounds. This is my wedding. You can have a piece of my wedding cake, right? And you have to have that hard discussion, right? Now, if you were an alcoholic, they're not going to say, get drunk with me at my wedding. But the sugar, they just get indignant. I baked this for you. I bought this for you, right? They get indignant. They can't it's crazy, really. I mean, it's kind of sad, really, because the science is there now. It's catching up anyway. So, yeah, it's a tough one.
You raised kids who were sugar-free. I want to talk about that a little bit, because my daughter, she's 8. She's a little sugar fiend. And really interestingly, when we had her and we were bringing her up, me and my wife were like, she's not touching sugar, right? And then suddenly we went from she's not touching sugar to we think we're controlling it, but man, you get a little bit of sugar out and she's like trying to find it and hide it and all kinds of stuff, right? And I realize that there's a codependent nature to this. I realize that if she's going to go to anyone to get sugar, and she's going to go to me, not her mum, and I'm much more likely to cave in and give her something. And because there's a part of me that doesn't want to lose her approval by being the bad dad and not giving her sugar and stuff, right?
Yeah.
You come across that in your work?
Oh, 100%. So, you know, at the core of our program, it's really codependency recovery. It's a sticking up for yourself program, a saying no, a boundary setting program. And these difficult conversations are some of the work that we process in groups because almost it now, a lot of people can get abstinent for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, or whatever. But the continuation, it's the difficult part is that post abstinence, where the real work is what you're describing. This need for difficult conversations, this need for saying no, this need to stand your ground or whatever you want to call it, so that, and it's like a muscle, it's like any muscle. It builds up as you continue to do it. And as far as the kids are concerned, 8 is still a good year, a good time to, double down on your no sugar thing. About 9 or 10 and 11 for sure, it gets harder. It's just really hard. I'll advise the folks who have young kids or just not going to have kids that from 0 to 5, mine made it to 6. And then we were at a birthday party. It was a roller skating party, the little music's blaring, like a cake and ice cream comes out, right? And they were twins. So they're like, both of their heads cranked towards us, can we this time have the cake and ice cream, right? And we gave in. And so for the rest of their childhood, they only had it at those outside birthday parties, never at home. But they would come home kind of ill feeling, and they started to realize that they couldn't do it. So, the hard discussions, the saying no, you have to spend time. You have to explain it. They're smart, and you have to explain it to them, and literally, even not to the point of giving them the survey, the studies, but explain that this is hurts your body. It's a treat. Really, it should only be an adult treat, and our family's a little different than other families. So you just have to, and if you spend time with them, I have one story that's really, I think, prescient in this case, is that this woman, her mother owned a bakery, right? She was my first coach, and she owned a bakery, and she was not on board with the daughter's desire to quit sugar. And she had a 9-year-old at the time. And so the mother would bring over the baked treats for the husband and the daughter, right? But during the time that we worked together for, I don't know, like a year and a half or whatever, as she got off it, she would be very open and very honest with her daughter. And she didn't go 100% abstinent, but she realized that it made her tummy hurt. It made, her irritable or whatever. And she would just talk to her openly and honestly, not like in a child's way. And it seemed to work, and she was 9 and obviously had grown up with this, bakery grandma. So it's, you're in a good place. You got not a lot of time, but you got some time.
I've noticed as well, which is pretty infuriating. We caught it out actually. Is we send Zia to school with a packed lunch so we can control what she's going to eat versus school dinners. And then she started coming home. Yeah, she started coming home with empty mini roll wrappers. It's like, where'd you get that from? And she's trained. But again, like I was saying to Liza about this, again, you'll get to know, Mike, that approval was definitely my thing growing up in life and still is today,
Yeah.
So when I was young, it wasn't necessarily that we didn't have sweet treats. We did. My packed lunch was, how can you put this, working class. So the stuff that was in my sandwiches was cheap. So I was always embarrassed about what I had in my packed lunch and didn't want to share it with anyone because I was ashamed.
Yeah.
My daughter sometimes the same when it's full of healthy stuff. So
Uh,
so there is that psychological thing, even with kids
yeah.
around sugar. Like they don't want to be the odd one out. You don't want to be different in anything when you're a kid. And
Yeah.
sugar is one of those things, right?
That's a good point. Another great point. It's so true. So true. It is a social construct of the inability to be accepted in whatever friend group, work group, family, whatever. 85% of our clients do not have spousal support. They've
Mm.
changed the diet around the house. They do not want to do it again. This one woman I remember distinctly. So she was about 5 months off, lost 20 or 30 pounds, and a friend of hers husband died. And they went out to lunch after they had a little time, and he had been dead a little while. She wanted to go out to lunch, and so they went out to lunch, and she ate her clean lunch, and no crap or whatever. And then the lady that lost the husband ordered a dessert and wanted to split it with her friend, and she couldn't say no. She just couldn't say no. I mean, she gained her resolve because she'd healed up for 5 months the next day, and she got right back on it. But she couldn't bring that conversation up then, like after discussing the late husband or whatever. She just couldn't bring it up, right? And so it's very real. The reasons people fall back or the reasons they don't go forward are largely attributed to these social interactions, these social, like you said, I'm the same way. This level of acceptance, when you were saying that, is like we used to get Kentucky Fried Chicken cold in our lunch sometimes. And my friend, who is very wealthy, never got to eat that. So he loved to trade with me. You know what I mean? And so it was like, and he always had good stuff. And so it was like, yeah, I mean, it's a very real phenomena for children and adults.
How does someone listening to this discern between whether they have a problem with their sugar intake or not? I mean, putting aside that everybody does because it's just a poison, but if people are trying to want to figure out, like, how would you know when it's getting too much? I could share my example after you talk, but what do you think?
Well, the thing is I always tell people, they go to sugaraddiction.com. If they go to that website, they don't need to take the quiz because it's already a foregone conclusion. And my answer is similar. It's like, it's internal. Like, you can't handle it. The strange part about this is that 95% of our clients are women between 50 and 90. Okay. Menopausal or menopausal women between 50 and 90. I like to say 40, even 30 and 90, but it's not true. It's 50 and 90. And what I believe is that they have had worries about weight and diet their whole life, and they finally accepted and are willing to look at that sugar is their Achilles heel. The sugar is the thing that stops every diet. Because every diet book you've ever read or that's ever been written says quit the white stuff, right? And 95 or 80, 90+% come to me for weight loss, or they got diagnosed type 2 or pre-diabetes, right? And they know that they can't be using sugar on that diet. So, and I don't want to, I want to make it perfectly clear to folks. I don't want to akin it to what people believe, because I don't believe it there either, in the drug and alcohol world, that you have to hit a rock bottom. You don't. You just don't. You can accept where you are anywhere in the process, because we do have 30 and 40-year-old women. We don't have any 20s, zero, like near zero. But we do have 30 and 40-year-old women who just say, enough, I'm done. You know what I mean? And so, yeah, I mean, it's very predictable at this point. I'm hoping to get it down to childbearing age women. That's the goal, always has been. But to date, we got no takers yet. And I just think that it's a maturation process of gaining a pound or two since high school or college, and not understanding why. They exercise good, they eat good, but they just are, biochemically, about a third of the people who ingest sugar set up cravings for more sugar, right? It's just a fact. Like, it's pretty proven now. I mean, the numbers vary, whatever, but it's right around a third of people, which tracks pretty well with the obesity numbers, right? Like, a third of people are obese. And self-reported, 72% of people who are obese say they're addicted to sugar. So it's I don't know the answer completely, but that's my best guess.
I
Or,
like it. It speaks to me. Mine initially when I stopped drinking alcohol 15 years ago. And I don't know when, but at some point I went 3 or 4 years not having sugar. Then I went back to like let's moderately
yeah,
use it. The reason I then this year decided that I'm done forever is I got fed up with the cognitive dissonance. So I got fed up with the back and forth and the arguments with myself, saying I wasn't going to do it, then going to do it, and then going out of integrity all the time. So then I realized, because I do a lot of internal family systems therapy, and I realized using that framework that all my decisions, every time I decided I wasn't going to have sugar anymore, it was coming from what they call in IFS a part. Like a wounded inner child part of me was making those decisions and using willpower. And then when I got that, I was like, okay, I'm going to make this decision from self, like I did with alcohol. And I'm just like, this is just not who I am. And ever since then, I've been so grateful that is every time I wake up, I don't have to think about whether I'm going to eat it or not because it's just not who I am. It's not in my life. I
yeah.
finally feel free. And I would say this is different to the time I did 3 or 4 years. Like in 50 years, I'm free. I know I'll never do it again. But
Right.
yeah, that's where it come from. It was the fight, constantly wasting energy
Yeah.
debating whether I'm going to go to the store and get a Ben and Jerry's ice cream tub, and then
Yeah.
debating how much I'm going to eat of it, debating whether I hide it from my wife or not, whether my kid can see it. I don't have any of that anymore. I'm just done with it.
Oh, it truly is a freedom from the free rent in your head that it was getting. You know what I mean? It's just like you described it very accurately. This back and forth, should I, shouldn't I? Like that amount of psychic, intellectual energy is just such a waste. Such a waste. I mean,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
people believe. Here's one of the difficult things for people to get and accept. Acceptance is big. Is that they can't, there's that probably the same third and probably more people, but definitely that third of people, which in the United States is over 120 million people. I mean, it's a crazy amount of numbers, right? So they can't moderate. In other words, they can't, like, one of the phrases is 100% abstinence is 100 times easier than 90% moderation. It's almost impossible to do a little. And it's, you know, one of the things that I study or try to study, I don't think we have the scientific diagnostic tools yet, is that I do believe that the feeling, which while it's not as an adult, I mean, you can push a buzz, like you can really, like, I don't know, maybe drink the highest sugar beverage or a lot of them, and 4 or 5 of them, and you might be able to push, that wired feeling that sugar gives you, right? That would, that you see when the cake and ice cream comes out at a 5-year-old's birthday party, that like insanity. I think you could push it. I wouldn't want to try, but I know you could probably push it. I just believe that two things. One, the buzz of sugar is long gone. And what is happening now is just a fighting off of withdrawals. Subconsciously, even largely, sometimes consciously, you just don't have time to be irritable and to be blue and to be hungry during the next 4 days of your life, 7 days of your life, because you got kids and you got a job and you got meetings and you can't be like not performing well, right? And so you don't do it. But more importantly, what I was going to say is that I believe into, neurochemically, I don't even know the right biochemically in your brain, that the feeling, while it's not buzzy, is so powerfully successful at soothing you emotionally that you're able, your reingestation makes perfect sense, like opioids, right? That classic description of like it's a warm hug, right?
Mm.
And so the same thing applies here, right? It's like this is unknowingly, again, we don't have the diagnostic tools. We don't even have the diagnostic tools for opioids, but it is powerful enough both to fight off withdrawals, but moreover, to just take the edge off, to soothe you from whatever's going on right now for a minute. And like any drug, that minute gets shorter. It might last 20 or 30 minutes. You got to re-ingest. 20 minutes, you got to re-ingest. So, I mean, you can tell that I've thought about this a lot and worked with a lot of people, and like hopefully it's in the place where cigarettes were 30 years ago. Like when you and I were young, smoking in airplanes, smoking in buses, smoking in offices,
Cinema.
smoking in restaurants. You remember trying to go out to a nightclub and not come home with your hair and your clothes smelling terrible, and now those people are pariahs, or they're ex, you know, they're stuck at the outside of the office building, this little clutch of people that they can't even go in the building or the restaurant or whatever.
Yeah,
So
when I was in LA, Zia was like 5, 6, something like that. When we was in LA, the schools were very careful to ask parents about sugar intake.
yeah,
Like they wouldn't just give it to them. This school that Zia's in the moment, I mean, they're just not on that page. They were even telling them to come home the other day. They were doing a bottle sale, so they wrote an email to us saying, "Here are the bottles that the kids are allowed to bring in: gin, and all the alcohol." And then the teacher even told my daughter, "Yeah, well, bring." My daughter said, "Surely not alcohol bottles." And she's like, "No, no, no, bring them in. They'll sell even better." So I had to write to the school to say, "Hey, surely you can have a bottle sale that doesn't involve indoctrinating 7, 6, 8-year-olds into bringing alcohol in as a treat to sell." You know what I mean?
right.
So I'm with you. I think eventually, I think more and more people are more conscious about putting sugar into their kids' body. Back onto the thing you were saying, though, I just want to share my own experience. I'm not saying this is the answer to the world's problems. It's just my own personal experience. But
Yeah.
I was lucky. I'm glad that I relapsed with alcohol 3 years after I stopped, because I never believed the buzz. I just never believed it. And then when I relapsed, I could try it, right? I could drink and I could be like, okay, when's this buzz going to hit me? And I could rate it out of 10. I realized very early into my relapse that there was no buzz going on. That certainly wasn't the reason I was drinking it. In the same way that nobody has ever failed on my watch to stop drinking alcohol because it tastes nice, right? Like I just can't get past the fact that my red wine tastes on it. It just never happens.
No.
And something that was really powerful for me in my own personal sugar journey is I was getting fed up of like this battle, and as obviously I wouldn't call myself an addiction specialist, but I know a lot about overcoming these type of things. And I said
Yeah.
to myself, Lee, what's happening, bro, is you're thinking about eating it, and then you're eating it very quickly. There's a part here of your personality that doesn't want to give yourself some space. So give yourself some space, right? So I found myself in the kitchen. I just taken my daughter to bed. I was in the kitchen and I'm like, okay, I'm going to get some ice cream. And I just had a breather, and I'm just like, what's going on? What do you want ice cream for right now, bro? What's going on? And he's just like, well, we always have ice cream. And do you know what I landed on? I was eating this stuff so unconscious. There was no addiction. There was no buzz. There was nothing. I was just a robot. Like I would take my daughter to bed and I would end up in the kitchen eating ice cream because that's what I always do. And when I came to peace with that, and I was like, I'm not going to do that anymore. Like
Right.
again, it was just like, oh, Wow. So like now I'm like, was this an addiction or is this a habit? And I was very similar with alcohol. It was like, even though I was drinking every single day, it wasn't necessarily the bottle calling me or the sugar calling me. It was, I just do this every day. And if I don't do it, who the hell will I be without it? What will people think, etc., etc.
Yeah.
So that's what helped me, when it came to sugar.
Well, you just described one of our techniques, which is that, between cravings and instant gratification, you do sit, take a deep breath. And one of the things I have people ask them, similar to what you did, is like, what do I really need right now? And a lot of times what comes up is they need to have that talk with the boss, or they need to have the talk with a spouse or whatever. There's different, if they're listening, and it sounds trite a lot of times, or it sounds like a little woo-woo, but the process is what you're describing, which is, sugar and all kind of substances have obfuscated the feelings we get from our body, what we're feeling, right? Well, a lot of us locked in our minds. And so you do need to, go that 12 inches down to your heart and just say, what's really bugging me? What am I, am I using this for an escape of some sort? So, yeah, so it's a very, very solid technique.
Yeah. I mean, I would say that when I stopped drinking alcohol, I went up a few video game levels in the game of life, right? For
Yeah.
for that I knew everything. Like I don't drink, I know everything. But it wasn't until I was doing my life coach training that I started doing more inner work that I realized that I actually had spent 40 years just in my head.
Yeah.
And in my 40s and now going into my 50s, now I feel what it's like to drink coffee. I
Mhm.
feel what it's like to drink tea, you know?
Sure.
I feel what it's like when I've had some sugar and my head's pounding. I never used to feel those things again, again, because largely I'm unconscious and I'm just do, and I'm afraid of being. And what you're talking about is you're teaching your clients to be, right? To be in their beingness,
Yes, yes,
feel.
yes,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. I love it.
I mean, I think one of the most tragic things, and this happens with almost everybody, definitely happened with me, is like headaches are like not headaches. They're sugar and caffeine withdrawals. They're like, it's there, and that should be a clue that it's messing with your brain. you know, so yeah.
Do you know what? Just before you go, I'd love to hear your thoughts on bread because I literally just stopped eating sugar, saw the weight come off. Um, I just loved it. Started eating bread. I know I was like, I'm not going to eat bread either. But then I started eating it a bit, and all of a sudden I get the distended belly,
Yeah.
you know, and
So
it
in
makes
our
me feel really
program,
uncomfortable.
like bread is, flour is off the table simply because of the same wired together, fired together phenomena. When you jack your glycemic index that high, you get a glycemic index or a glucose blast to the brain, right? And a cheap one at that. It's not a complex carbohydrate or whatever, and it's not slow. It's just and your body's like usually attached to a donut or a cookie or a cake or something. So it's like, okay, I've got this. Where is the fructose half of this? Where is the real stuff? It's like drinking a beer. A lot of times you start the evening with beer and you end it with whiskey or whatever, vodka. And so it's the same thing, and it's um, it. I've got to do more research on it. I've been swearing to do this for a month. So something about the surface area too, that it dissolves so quickly, like right in your mouth and in your stomach real quickly, and passes into the bloodstream. And a lot of bread today has sugar in it anyway, but I'm just saying. But the bottom line is when you have and I call it it's a substance use disorder that is ultra processed carbohydrates, in order to reset, to bring yourself back to what I call the factory settings that a human being is supposed to have, you can always go to the store and change. If you're, people are biohacking and they're trying to get this stuff to put on top of it, the supplements and the whatever. if they would just try this for 30, 60, 90 days, no one ever goes back because their skin clears, their weight fixes, their blood markers, their A1C, everything gets into order. And you said, you were wearing the glucose monitor. It's like when your glucose goes up on a piece of bread, through the roof, you start to understand that metabolically you can't continue that. You just can't keep doing it. So yeah, they're all married together. The 3 legal death traps, and I'm getting kind of strong on it. Death trap I don't think I've ever used, but slow suicide. This woman wrote a book about colas and slow suicide. It's like sugar, flour, and caffeine. If you're willing, if you're a health-oriented person, just give it a try. Just try for 30, 60, 90 days of abstinence and, see what happens to you physically, emotionally, mentally, relationally, familial. I mean, every part of your life will change a little bit, I think. At least it has been for us.
What have you got going now, Mike? Are you coaching people individually, group? You got courses, books? What's going on?
We got it all, man. It's turned into something that's a blessing a little bit, but we've got the 30-day challenge, which is like, it's probably less than there because the guys got such a good discount with the pound, but it's like, it'll be like £5 or something for the 30-day videos. And then there's another part of it, which is the meetings. We have 4 or 5 meetings a day, Zoom support meetings. And then we have, we train coaches. We do have one-on-one. It's kind of pricey. We can have, assign you a coach, but we just got approved by the National Board of Health and Wellness Coaches to provide continuing education for their certified, board certified folks. So it's growing, and we are kind of moving towards this because we looked at the business and we said, like, we could train or we could help coach a whole bunch of people, but what if we could train this little army of coaches? We would be in a position to, have a lot of reach and help a lot of folks. So that's kind of where we're moving, but we still my goal is to have 24 meetings a day, 7 days a week. And I forgot to do the math though. And that was 168 facilitators. Then you add another probably 20 or 30% for switching around. And it's, 200 facilitators. So we got a lot to go.
Wow. Thank you for doing it though, Mike, because it's much needed out there, bro. And thanks for coming on the show again. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, my friend. This is always a pleasure. I'm a student of articulation. I'm a student of speaking in general. And you're right there in the top 5 of people whose level of ability to express themselves, articulate is right up there. So congrats.
Thank you, Mike. My role was more of a listener today, but I will take that on board. Thank you very much.
All righty. Be good, my friend.